All right, let's see everyone what's going on over here. Uh, okay. Hmm. All right, let's go ahead and get started, everyone. First of all, welcome to the stream. Let me go ahead and change this thing. There we go. So on the chat, if anyone wants to go and introduce yourself, you can go and write where you're logging in from, meaning which region of the world. I'm in Houston, Texas. Hopefully everyone can hear me correctly. And if you can hear me, go ahead and write it in the chat that you can hear me. And you should be able to see my screen also. Let me go ahead and probably make the screen a little bit, the font a little bit bigger. 2, 3, I think that should be big enough. All right. So in the YouTube stream chat, you can simply type in like where you're from. I'm just going to type in my name. I am from Houston. And this stream is about Swift data. We actually did a stream, I think, a couple of weeks ago, in which we started building our Swift data application. So we're going to be continuing building that, and we're going to do a recap. So if you want to, I can definitely do a small recap of what we are building. So this is about Swift data. All right. So go ahead and, if you want, you can go ahead and add something on the chat window, like where are you from, where are you logging in from, just like I did. Visiting from Nigeria. Wow. Okay. Well, welcome, Wilson. Thank you for logging in from Nigeria. Who else is logging in? Let's see. Anybody else logging in from anywhere else? You know, I'll say introduce yourself. Okay. So this stream is about Swift data. Everyone can see the font. Should be, hopefully it should be big enough. I mean, it's big enough for me. So if you can see the font correctly, you can see the screen correctly. Make sure that you write something in the chat so that I know and I can get started. So can you see the screen correctly? The font size, is it big enough for every one of you? And this is a very casual stream. I mean, it's not a formal anything. All right. All right. Everyone can see the screen? Okay, so looks like it's big enough. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Let me show you the app that we built last time. And since you can see the screen and everything, so this is about Swift data. And Swift data, as you already know, that Apple released Swift data at WWDC 2023, and it's going to be a replacement for core data. And behind the scene, it actually uses core data. So you can definitely check that out. I mean, it's built on top of core data. I like Swift data. It's easier to use. I mean, yes, it does have some weird spots and glitches, but it's definitely, it's fun to use basically. Okay. So a recap of what we did last time. Let me actually show you the app. I mean, the app we're still building, so it's not much going on. You can see on the right-hand side, we have this preview, and I can go ahead and write the name of a budget. So we're building a personal finance app. So I'm going to say groceries, because let's say I want to buy groceries and the budget will be, let's say $100. So there we go. The groceries is added to my all budgets. I could go ahead and add a different budget for, let's say, vacation, and that can be, let's say, $500. So this is exactly what we built last time when we were learning about SwiftData in our first stream, and this is all the code that we have written. So there are a couple of different things we need to see over here. If you see over here in the preview, we started with the budget, like the budget model or the class that is going to represent what we want to save in the database. All right, so the first thing to note over here is the budget class that we created, and it is decorated with, this is a new model macro, and what this model macro allows you to do is to persist this particular class to the database. We have the budget with two different properties, the name and the limit, and that's pretty much it. I mean, it's a pretty simple class, as you can see. The model macro is the one that actually makes it so that it can be saved to the database. So that's the most important part for SwiftData, at least. We're also importing SwiftData, or else you won't be able to use model macro. And when we go to the content view, we access the model context, which is kind of like the manage object context in core data. So it kind of knows about the whole object graph and everything, and this will be responsible for adding our models, adding our budget to the database. And how do we get access to this? Well, we injected it into our view. And you can see that the model container over here is used to inject it. We have to provide what are you injecting, so it will be available, like budget will be available. And in-memory true means that the database that we're creating, it's only in the memory. So it's not going to be available, like it's not going to be persisted. It's only going to be in the memory. And in your actual application, you will not use in memory. We're only using it for previews, so that we, for the previews, we don't really want to persist. I mean, if you want to persist, that's fine. You can simply ignore this argument in memory. But for previews, we don't really want to persist the data to the disk or to the database. All right. All right. And then we have some checks going on over here. We use the query wrapper or the query macro to get our data, and then we finally display it over here. All right. Now, I'm not going to use any MVVM and all that stuff. Those things don't really work with SwiftData, so that's going to just make your life much harder. So try to just use SwiftData as it is supposed to be. Don't try to wrap everything with a certain pattern. Oh, I have to use MVVM, I have to use Viper, I have to use this and that. Just make it simple. Make it simple. Simple is always much better. All right. As Apple said, the most natural way is the best way. And that's the most natural way. We have a button over here. When you click the button, it simply create an instance of the budget and use the context to insert it. And that's it. Simple. 2 lines of code to add something to the database. All right. And the great thing is that once you insert something, the query it notices a change that, hey, something got inserted in the database. So it refresh or re-renders the list. And that is what's making everything really nice and synced correctly so that everything is working. And whenever a new data is inserted, new budget is inserted, uh, the user interface is automatically refreshed. So that's always a nice thing to have. All right. So let's go ahead and do a couple of different things. All right. First of all, we can see over here we're using form valid. Now, if I type in something over here, let's say if I type in uh, groceries, you can see the save button over here is still not activated, right? It's only going to get activated if I type in the limit. So let's go ahead and type in the limit. And now you can see it's definitely getting activated. But what if I go to the groceries and simply press space? That should not be allowed. I mean, I'm simply pressing space and the save button is getting activated. So we don't really want to do that. So this means that there is something wrong with our is form valid and we need to fix this part. Okay? So let's see that how we can fix it. Well, one of the ways of fixing it is to just create an extension which is going to make sure that the string is it doesn't have any empty characters. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, extensions, and I'm going to be making extension on the string. So I'm just going to call it string plus extensions. There we go. We're going to create an extension on a string, and we're simply going to check that if the string is white space or empty. So I'm just going to use this property that I created earlier on, and it's going to trim out all the white spaces, and it's going to tell me that if this is going to be, if the string is going to be empty, or even if it's using a white space. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to use this part. Now, if I go to the content view, instead of using this budget thing, I mean the empty thing, maybe we can try to use over here budget.name is empty or white space. Okay. Budget name, sorry, budget name. So hopefully now if we enter something that is empty or even a white space, it's not going to work. So if I go ahead and enter the limit 10 and I entered some characters, let's say groceries, okay, this is working fine. But what if I press white space? You can see now our save button is not really getting enabled. So that's pretty good. We have fixed that problem. So it only gets enabled when you actually write something in there. If I simply press space, it's not going to get enabled. So that's always good to have these kind of checks in the place. All right. So what's the other things that we can do? Well, how about making this unique? What about if I add two titles? What do you think it should happen? I mean, if I say groceries and I added a groceries and I save it again, I can add like multiple titles which are groceries. So how can I take care of this particular problem? Maybe in our application, we are not allowing users to add the same budget name again and again. So what will be a solution for this problem, right? Anybody knows how can we solve this problem? I mean, we don't really want to allow people to insert multiple groceries or groceries with the same exact or the budget with the same exact name. So right now we are trying to insert groceries, and I can go ahead and add as many groceries as I want, as you can see over here. So we don't really want to allow that. We want to make sure that the budget title is unique. Now, one of the things that you can do in SwiftData is if I go to the budget model, they do provide attributes, meaning if your property needs some certain special thing, you can create, or sorry, you can allow that to have a attribute like a built-in attribute. And one of those attributes in SwiftData is called, and there are many, unique. So now what we're doing over here is that we are saying that the name that you are trying to enter for the budget, the property budget, or the property name of the budget will be unique. So over here, we're saying unique. So this is a good property. Let's go ahead and check out what's going to happen if we decorate it, if we use the unique attribute. So if I go back now, and I'm going to enter groceries, and I'm going to go ahead and enter, let's say 100, and I'll save it. All right. What about if I save it again? Well, I'm clicking on the save button and it's not really doing anything. So this means that the unique is working, but this is where the things get a little interesting, right? We must use a set structure to do exist it. Set structure? I'm not sure what that means. We must use a set structure do exist it. If you can a little bit elaborate, maybe I can answer that. Uh, Set structure, I don't know what that means. Use a set structure. All right. So what exactly is going on? After we put the unique attribute, we are not able to insert the groceries. But what about if I change the groceries limit to, let's say, 300? You see what happened? I don't know if you noticed or not, but what happened is if you put unique, which we did right over here, we put the unique, and if you perform an insert, so what it ended up doing is updating. Let me go ahead and do it again. Oh no, now it's, oh, there, this always happens. Like, see, I mean, it's not really allowing me to type in anymore. So I always run into these problems where the preview kind of like just dies. Nope. So I'm typing and it's not really allowing me to type anything. Not really sure how to fix that problem. Uh, I end up usually running the actual simulator. Yeah, it's kind of messed up again. All right, so let me go ahead and run it in the actual simulator. You will run into these problems, so it's good that we are running into these problems so that you will be able to see. So my preview is completely, like I cannot really type in the preview. I mean, I'm typing. I don't know what that means. It's not really running. See, nothing is going on. All right. Okay, not a big deal. We can always run our application in an actual simulator, and that will allow us to type something. So we just have to wait a little bit because the actual simulator does take a while to run. It's kind of unfortunate that we have to do that. And one other thing that I want to do is, since we're simply learning, I'm going to go to my app over here, and maybe I'll say that in memory. I want to just use in memory for now. But you should not do this for your actual application because you want to persist the data, right? So you don't really want in memory or anything. Okay, so we're kind of like back to where we started. Let's go ahead and add groceries. Now I'm running on the actual simulator, so I'm going to say groceries, add a limit of 100. Okay. What about if I simply change, I keep the name same, but I change the limit to 500. And this is where you will see what exactly is going on behind the scene. If you are using the unique attribute in SwiftData, on a name, on a string, then what's going to happen is that it's updating the existing data. It's actually called an upsert. So it finds the existing name, which it already has, which is groceries, and it simply updates that. So if I go over here and change this to 456, you can see it changes to 456. So it's not really allowing us to insert a different, insert a different record, but it's updating our record. Now, this is a functionality maybe you want, but this is a functionality also that maybe you're like, I don't want that. So what do we want to do in our case when there is a duplicate name, or if you're trying to insert something that already exists, is not allow the user to even perform an upsert. So we want to throw an error or tell the user that, hey, this is duplicate. You can't do that. You can insert, uh, two groceries with the same exact name. So how do we do that? I mean, the attribute unique is not really working out in our favor because it's performing an upsert. So probably I'm going to write over here that dot unique attribute performs an upsert, which basically means updates existing data. If it's already inserted, then it basically updates the existing data. So how do we solve that problem? I mean, what can we do? Now, there are many different ways of solving this problem, but you may actually have to do it kind of like manually. You may have to create your own function that checks everything, that if it's unique or not. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways, and then you can actually see which one you select or which one you like or not. So I'm going to implement the unique or exist function to check if the name, the budget name, already exists. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to show you how you can create exist function in multiple ways. So the first one I'm going to do is just a static function. And I'm going to call it exist. And you have to pass in the context over here. So we're going to pass in the context, which will be a model context. And you're going to pass in the name of the budget. And it's going to return you either true or false. All right. Now you can see that I'm marking this particular function as static. I will show you that how you can create this as a instance or an object function also, but it's up to you. Like if you want to keep it like a function that is, a static function or instance function, and then we'll compare, and then you can choose whichever one you want. All right. So in the exist function, what we're trying to do is we're trying to check if it already exists. Then we want to basically throw an error basically if it exists. I mean, you can throw an error if you want to. That's fine too, I guess. It's kind of up to you. All right, but exist, I think we're just going to return true or false for now. All right. So how do we exist? I mean, how do we check if the name of the budget already exists? Well, we have to create a predicate. So let's create a predicate. Predicate will be on the budget. And we're going to check if the name is matching the name. So whenever we create a predicate, which is this part, the only property names that you can use in the predicate should be the ones that are stored in the database. So if you have any property over here in your budget class that is a computed property, then you cannot use it in the predicate. All right, so we have the predicate. The next thing that we're going to create is something called a fetch descriptor. So let's go ahead and create a fetch descriptor. And the job of the fetch descriptor is to eventually be passed to the fetch function so that it can perform an actual fetch. All right, so I'm going to pass in the predicate over here, predicate. And now we can use the context.fetch and pass in the descriptor. But this thing can blow up. So I'm going to go ahead and use try and wrap this with try and catch. For the catch, we're just going to return false. But over here, we're going to get the result. So what is this going to do is it's actually going to perform an SQL query in the background, and it's going to fetch the budget using the budget name because that's the predicate that we are setting. And it's going to give me the result. So this result will contain the number of, the number of budgets with the name that you're providing, like groceries. Now, over here, we have to check that, first of all, if result is empty, well, if it's not empty, then it already exists. If it's empty, then it's false. And that's that's what we're going to return over here. All right. So this is our exist function that is on the budget class, but it's a static function which is inside the budget class, and it checks that if that particular budget name already exists or not. All right. So let's go ahead and see that how we can use this particular exist function in our code so that a user is not allowed to enter multiple, budget names or the same budget name again, like multiple times. Now, if you have any questions, you can use the YouTube chat to ask questions. Hopefully, I'm going at a good pace. I'm not going too fast or too slow. But yeah, if you do have any questions, you can definitely ask. All right. Okay, let me go back to the content view. All right. So looking at this code, this is the code for the save, right? Right there. So now we have already created the exist function. We need some way to incorporate that function right over here so that we can start using it. So once we create the budget, I think we can probably do something like this. If budget.exist, we pass in the context, we pass in the name. So if it already exists or if it doesn't exist, then insert the budget. Else, well, do something else. Show error to the user. We can move this over here to insert the budget. And this is just one way. I'll show you another way, and then you can choose whichever one that you like. All right. So if the budget does not exist, then insert the budget. So this is basically checking if the budget does not exist, then insert the budget. Else, show the user or show error to the user. I just wish that my previews were working. I can't really type in the preview for some reason. Let's see if I can refresh that. Maybe I can type something. No, I still cannot type anywhere. It's kind of messed up. I don't know what happened. Let's close it, I guess. All right. And show the error. So right over there, we have to show the error to the user. Now, how you show the error, it's up to you. Probably you should create some sort of a really nice looking control to show the error. But I'm going to just do the minimum amount of work. So I'm just going to create a error message. Error message. There we go. And I'll just show the error message over here. All right. So somewhere along the lines of over here, I can just show the error message, which will be error message. Now, obviously, just do your much better work than what I'm doing. Error message is, what should be the error message be? We can say budget name already exists. Okay, that's, bare minimum, I guess. Let's go ahead and run this. We have to run it on a simulator, unfortunately, because my Xcode previews is not really working. Okay, let's go ahead and try it out. I'm going to go ahead and enter a budget. I'll call it groceries. I will enter the limit. Save. Okay, it's saved. And I'll press the save button again. But this time, when I press the save button again, it actually tells me that nope, you can't really do that. That particular budget already exists. So I think we created our exist function and looks like it's working out fine, right? Now, if I go over here into my groceries and I enter something else, and let's change this to, let's say, 500, it gets added. I mean, that's perfectly fine, but I don't really want to see this anymore. I mean, there's no point of showing you a message when it went through correctly. So we need to find a way to delete the error message or remove the error message. So probably I can go ahead and do it over here after it's done. There we go. So if everything goes good, we can simply go ahead and reset the error message. And if you want, you can reset other stuff also, right? I mean, there are some other things you can reset, like you can reset the budget name, like the text fields. If you want, you can reset. You should be resetting those things also. And budget limit will be nil, so that your form will be nice and clean when you're starting it again. So let me run this again. Let me go ahead and enter groceries. And you have the limit 100. Oh yeah, there we go. It cleared up, you can see. What if I enter the groceries again? And it doesn't really matter what the limit is. I get this budget name already exists. So whether you want to clear it at that point, or I guess if you or not, but budget name already exists, I think at that point it shouldn't clear up. So we may have to think about like where do we want to put this error message clearing part, all right? But if I go over here and say vacation, okay, so it enters all of that stuff, all right? Any questions so far? Now, this is just one way of checking for the budget. And you might be thinking that, hold on, why are you typing a lot of logic inside the view? Well, we're not really typing any business logic inside the view or domain logic. We are typing presentation logic inside the view. All right, the actual logic to check whether something exists or not is inside the budget class. So you can easily write a unit test for it. And I'll show you, if you have time, I'll show you that you can write a unit test for it. And that will be perfectly fine. Okay. Now, another way of doing the same thing, you may like this way better that I'm about to show you, is to just use a save function inside your budget class, which can check for exist. So let me show you what I mean. So what if I create a save function over here? Save. And you can only save when you have access to the context. So I'm just going to get access to the context. So I'm creating a save function inside my budget class. And now what I'm going to do is just create a different copy of this. Exactly the same thing, but we will use an instance function, meaning not static function, and we'll make it private. It's the same thing. It's the same exist function, but now you should be able to call it from inside other instance functions or object functions over here. And now I can say something like if it does not exist, context and the name. If it does not exist, then save it, which is context.insert. And we will save it. Save what? Well, save self, because we are already inside the budget class. Else, well, it's kind of up to you what you want to do for the else. We can actually throw budget error dot duplicate name. I mean, you can come up with another different exception that you can do that. And this function can throw an error. So I'm just going to say decorate it with throws. All right. So it really I think it really depends if you like the static function approach better or the save approach function better. Both have their own way of dealing with things. We still have to implement the budget error, like which is not a big deal. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and add an error over here. So let me scroll up to the top. You can see error is pretty basic stuff. I mean, we're just creating a budget error, which is an error, and the only error is duplicate name. That's the only error we have. All right. So what this does is that it makes our calling side a little bit more simpler because so it makes the whole function atomic. This means that we only have to call the save function, and we don't really care that much about the exist function. Exist function is kind of like a private function now. It's not exposed to the outside world. So the caller, which means if I go over here, I'll probably have to rewrite this again. The caller needs to be only concerned about calling the exist function. So let me see how we can call that. I'm sorry, the budget save function. So budget.save, I think it looks nicer. We just have to call save, pass in the context, right? And if there is some type of an error, then we'll try to catch it over here. There we go, something like that. Error message. Now I'm just going to assign some sort of a hard-coded error message, but it can be coming from the domain also. There we go. And we can say error message equals to empty. So I think it's nice like this also. I mean, it looks much nicer. It's like you're just calling the save function, and that's pretty much it. What do you think? Go ahead and write in the comment, what do you think about this function as compared to the other way that we were doing, which was actually manually calling exist, the static function exist. Do you think this looks much better to you? It's much nicer to use? I'm going to drink some water and go ahead and write your comments. All right. If I run this application, let me go ahead and run it. And we'll do the same exact test over here. I'm going to go ahead and say groceries. I'm going to say 100. Okay, it went through. I'm going to say again groceries with this should not go through because the name is the same, right? Okay, so budget name is already taken, so that's fine. Vacation. Okay, so everything else is working okay. All right. So from the behavior point of view, the last time we used the exist function, which was static, this time we're making it a little bit more nicer to use. We're just saying budget.save and that's it. So both the behavior remains the same. The implementation is a little bit different. All right. Any questions before we move to testing? I know that we haven't really covered updating. Probably we won't be able to cover the updating or the deleting part. But hey, we're going to cover testing. So that's I think that's a very important thing, right? How to test your application. So any questions at this point? All right, then let's move to testing now. This is where the things get interesting. Like everybody is asking, everybody's saying that, well, if you write this kind of a code, how would you even test it out? Oh, I have to create view models. I have to wrap my Swift UI into this and that. No, you don't have to do anything. All right. I think they're all chasing something that doesn't exist. They're all trying to, you know, they're all trying to just do it in a way that will make their life much harder. Swift UI is already a framework. SwiftData is already a framework. You don't have to wrap it with something else. And I'll show you right now how you would test the code. All right. What are we testing over here? I think that's the first thing, right? Because as developers, we write the code and we're like, oh, we have to test every single thing. I created an instance of budget. I need to test. Well, you don't need to test an. How do you create an instance or an object of a budget? Come on, right? You have to test the business logic, the actual rules. So what's the rule in our application? Well, our rule is as a user, I should not be allowed to enter the same budget name twice. That's the behavior that we want to test. That's the actual behavior, right? So how do we test that behavior? Okay, let me go ahead and add testing. So I'll go ahead and add a target over here. And I will simply go ahead and say test. Unit testing bundle, because we're testing. So unit testing bundle is fine. All right, there we go. There we go. Okay. All right, so now we are entering a territory for, we're entering a place where we will be able to write our test. I'm going to remove some of the stuff we don't need, at least not for now. Let's remove some of this stuff. And I'm going to show you how you can write the most important test. All right. I've seen a lot of developers who are like, oh no, I cannot write this code because I cannot test this. I need to test that we can add a one string or one object to an array, and then I have to test that we have to write we can test like a two objects to an array. How about three? Or how about five objects to an array? You want to test that also? At that time you'll be testing an array. You'll be testing the Swift language. But I don't want to test the Swift language. I don't want to test the Swift UI framework or the Swift data framework. I want to test the behavior exposed by my application. So I'm interested in writing the most important test, which may not be all the tests. Not all tests are equal. I actually wrote an article on that. Actually, I'll show you later on. It's for my newsletter. Okay, so what is our test? What are we even testing? The name of the test is very important. So I'll give it a name. Test. Well, it should begin with a test. So that's why we have a test. Should not allow duplicate name for a budget. That's fine. If you want to refine the name, if you want to say should throw exception for duplicate name, for not allowing duplicate name, that is also fine, all right? So this is our test. This is what we have to write. Now, in order to write our test, we need to get access to the model context. Because without the context, remember model context? Now, without the model context, we won't be able to write the test because, well, we won't be able to perform insert, we won't be able to perform fetch, we won't be able to do anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create like a mock container, or you can call it like a testing model container. So let's go ahead and add that, which will only be used for testing purposes. So that's why I'm adding it into my testing target rather than somewhere else. The only job of the mock container is to simply go ahead and create the model context so I can work with. So I'm just going to go ahead and enter something over here. You can see right there. So mock container is simply a property. It has to be decorated with the main actor because the model context can only be accessed through the main actor or the main context or the main queue, the main thread. So we're creating the model container, mock container as a property. It needs access to the budget, which it doesn't have. For testing purposes, we're also storing everything in the memory, so it's not really going to the database. Now, I think when you are writing a test and you are writing a test and you're testing something like a managed dependency, meaning that only you can access it and only I can access it, right? It's on the device and only I can access the database. In those cases, if you want, you should be able to use the actual database. So I would always be interested in writing this test where I'm not using in store in stored in memory. So I would always, and I'm going to write it out over here, so this permanent, um, I would be more interested in using the actual database and not in memory for my tests. Now, why I'm doing that right now, why I'm using in memory, because it makes my life a little bit easier. I don't have to delete the data. But if I'm writing for an actual project with an actual company, I would not use in-memory database even for the testing. I would use an actual database where I can actually insert it to a real database in my test. All right. That is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Just make sure that when your tests are completed, you are deleting that data that you inserted in the test. Problem solved, right? A lot of people over here makes a lot of mistakes when they are trying to access a dependency that they completely control, in which in this case I completely control this dependency. Nobody else can access my database. It's on the device, so nobody else can access it. And they try to mock everything. Let's mock this, let's mock that, let's mock into mock, and then in the end, you don't even know what you're actually testing. In the end, you find out, oh, I was just testing the mock. So try to test as close as to the real world. All right. Sometimes that's not possible because sometimes you don't have access to a payment gateway. I mean, you do have to mock those things because they will cost money. Those are unmanaged dependencies. Those are dependencies you don't control. That's fine for mocking that way. But over here, we can actually go ahead and use the real database. And having said that, you can see I'm still using in memory, but you should be using a real database in this case. All right, because then you'll have to delete it and all that stuff. All right. The budget.self, we don't have access to budget.self, so I think I have to just add it to the target. So let's go and add to the target. So that's done. Okay, so I think now we should be able to use our test, or we should be able to write our test. And by the way, if you have any questions, you can just add it into the chat. Import, okay, and SwiftData. That's the first thing we're going to import. So now we're writing the test. And the next thing is we're going to create a context. This will be the model context that we will create. And inside the setup is basically going to get fired whenever our test is running. So we're going to create the setup, and we're going to mark this with main actor because we will be initializing our context in there. So this will be mock container dot main context. Remember the container that we set up only for testing? We can now initialize it. We can assign it to the context. So at this point, our context is initialized. Now we move to the testing. Create a budget. Okay, budget equals to budget, passing the name, groceries, limit $100, and then budget dot save, passing in the context. Save can throw an exception. We don't really care that much about that for now. I'm just going to use try exclamation mark. That's going to save the budget, right? Now over here, if I try to save it again, if you save budget with the same name again, then it should throw an exception. And that is exactly what we're trying to test over here. We're trying to test that one time you're saving the budget with the groceries, that's perfectly fine. It's not duplicate. But if next time that you are trying to save the budget over here, then it should throw an exception, right? So it should throw an exception at that point. So that's what we are checking over here, that if we try to save the budget again, it should throw an exception. And if it does throw an exception, then it means that our test has passed and our domain logic is actually working. So how do we test for that? Well, we can use assert throws error, and we can try to do budget.save again. So again, I'm going to save something. The same budget. I'm using the same exact budget. I'm trying to save it. I'm going to pass in the context over here. The message, if nothing happens, is no exception was thrown. But if it does throw an exception, then we get an error back. And this is the error that we can actually test. So the thrown error, we can try to cast it to something else. We can try to, maybe it will work or maybe it will not. So we will try to cast it to the budget error. And now we can simply check using the XT assert, assert equal. Where is assert equal? This one. That the thrown error, which is the actual and the expectation, is that this kind of an error will be the duplicate name error. So in this test, we are testing that the exception will be thrown. Why? Because look over here, I'm saving it over here, and I'm saving it again over here. But the title of or the name of the budget still remains the same, groceries. That is not allowed. So it should throw an exception. All right, let's go ahead and run the test. Now, in the end, I guess you can also test over here. You can also go ahead and fetch it again and see if it only returns you one record or something. But I think that should be enough, hopefully. But let's go ahead and run the test. You can, I guess you can fetch it and see that only one record exists if you want to go extra something, extra mile. So I'm going to go ahead and try to run. I'm running the test right now and try to see if that test actually passes or not. If I try to save two budgets with the same exact name, will it throw an exception or not? If it does not throw an exception, then our code is not correct. It's not good. We need to do something. So this means that hopefully our code is working. And one last thing, you can check over here, like you can check like if that in the database there's only like one thing. So you should probably do some sort of a fetch. Remember the fetch thing, fetch descriptor thing. If you do a fetch over here, you probably should do it, I guess. But if you do a fetch over here, it should only give you one record. So context.fetch should give you one record when fetching for the same name. All right, and you can check just to confirm it that again that that it's only inserted one, even though the exception was fired and it's confirmed. Well, it's saying that it was fired correctly. You can perform a context.fetch to confirm it that that you were able to get that stuff. And I think we can probably get it from here, right? We can just grab these things that we created earlier on, this thing, predicate, blah blah blah, context.fetch, passing in the descriptor, and we don't care about that. I think it's going to give us some sort of a result or something. And XCT assert equal or assert true, I guess, or I don't know, result.count or something. Count equals to 1. I don't know if that's the way you will check over here. Let's go ahead and run the test again. Oh no, it actually failed. So what just happened? All right. So it inserted into the database the first one and should not duplicate assertion fail. Should not duplicate assertion fail. I guess it threw away that particular assertion then the exception was fired. What if we don't check for that and we check for saving? I mean, I guess we can try that approach also. If we don't check for the exception, I guess that's another test. Like if you if you save something, then you're checking that the exception was thrown. But if you are also saving it another time, like if I do this another time, well, I guess it's just going to blow up at this point, right? So if you try to do this, it's just going to blow up. It's not going to even go anywhere, right? So, all right, let's go ahead and run this. So it might be you have to write like multiple tests for these things. I think you can see that it's throwing test should not assertion fail, but it's not really telling us that why it is failed. So I guess this condition is somehow returning out to be false for some reason. Any idea why it's coming out to be false? Result.count. Shouldn't it have at least one? Or is it not even going through? Kind of hard to tell over here with all this stuff printed out. I was thinking that it should at least have one thing. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. I don't know if it's going to go over here. Let's go ahead and see what's there. Can we even access the result? Or did I mess up somewhere? Wait, there is no name, right? Duh. See that? Where is the name coming from? There is no name right there. Probably we should be calling it groceries, I think, right? Groceries. I mean, it's not gonna. Why didn't it actually tell me build time error? Okay, let's see over here. Well, it can find the budget. All right, so I wonder if we can go back to the original thing now. So it's gonna throw an error. Then we try to fetch the groceries, and then hopefully it will tell us that there is one grocery is available. One grocery item was still there, and there we go. All right. I was just doing some stupid mistake, and I don't know why it was not even complaining. So I guess inside the predicate, it was not even checking that that name thing doesn't even exist, right? I mean, there's no such thing as name, so I have to pass in groceries over here. So yeah, so this is a way that you will write your test. You don't have to create view models and all that stuff to test anything. Now, you might say that, oh, wait a minute, how are you going to test this code, right? How are you going to test this code? Well, this will be tested with your end-to-end testing. That's my answer for that. This code that you're writing in the view, and this is all presentation logic, this is not domain logic. So remember that there is always a big distinction between what is a domain logic and what is presentation logic. Now, I'm not saying that you should be writing tests to test one and one thing, like one end-to-end test for this and one end-to-end test for this. No, 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 no. That's not end-to-end test. I mean, that's you're gonna end up with like a million of tests. We're not talking about that. What are we testing? I think that's the question that you have to answer. What are we testing for? And I think this is where most of the developers, they're like, yeah, we're testing that when we click something that the function is called. Nope, 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 no, 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 no. We're not testing for that. Are we testing for when you click the save button and you write something, then the disable button? No, we're testing the behavior of the app. We're not testing that whether some function or a property is called, when a function or property is set. We're testing the behavior. So when you're writing your end-to-end test, make sure that it's testing the behavior. What is the behavior we're testing? We're testing the behavior that as a user, I should not be able to add duplicate names. That's the behavior that you should be testing. All right. So your end-to-end test, which is the most important test that you will write, should be testing that particular behavior. And when I'm writing end-to-end test, and we haven't really written end-to-end test, this is just a unit test, I tend to write end-to-end tests that are much longer, and they take happy path, meaning everything is working fine, and a couple of edge cases. So for every single task that you're doing, you will end up doing like a couple of happy paths, or sorry, so stories that you're working, you will do a couple of different happy paths and one or two different edge cases. And those tests are, yes, longer to write, but those are the best tests to write against regression. The end-to-end tests are the best tests to write, which is going to make sure that your application is working correctly. So try to use that approach. Now, I've already shown you that the logical part, the domain part of the application can be tested if your domain part is right inside the model itself. So we didn't really have to create any view models and this model and that model and 30 different view models to do this. Actually, if you try to use view models and all that stuff with Swift data, you are in for a very big lot of pain because it's not going to work out. All right. Now you can twist and turn and make it work, that's fine, but then there's no point using SwiftUI framework if you're not really using all the capabilities that it is providing you. All right. All right, so hopefully you have enjoyed this particular session. I know I covered a lot of different things, including testing, how to write your domain logic. The domain logic is the most important logic that we have in your application. That's the heart of your application where all the logical parts are. So this is definitely something that you should be testing, the domain, most important part. All right. Not all tests are created equal. When you're writing a test, you have to think about, if I don't test this, am I going to get a call at 2 a.m. in the morning? Remember that. If I don't write test, am I going to get a call in the middle of the night from my customer, from my team lead, who's saying that, hey, this doesn't work? I mean, you tell me, which test is more important? If you're building a finance application for a bank, would you invest time in writing tests to make sure that the deposit went through or the withdrawal went through? Or will you test right, or will you be testing the code that is going to make sure that the color was white when you click a button? All right, that's up to you. I think the real money is made when the withdraw, the deposit, all of those went through correctly, not when you check like you're writing a test to make sure when you click something and the color was purple. Nobody cares about those things. You're not going to get a call in the middle of the night saying, hey, guess what? The color was not purple when I clicked the button, so we're doomed now. I don't think I've ever received that call in 20 years. So, all right. So not all tests are created equal. Try to invest the time in writing the test that is going to give you the best return on your investment. Always remember that. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this. Let me actually show you something over here. I have recently launched my website. Let me see if I can open it up. There we go. It's called adamsharp.school. That is my website. And this is where I'm hosting all of my different courses and everything. So if you ever want to like check out the courses that I have made, and you can see I have a lot of different courses if I scroll down. Even the Swift data course is there. If you want to learn about Swift data, if you want to learn about test-driven development, so I do have courses on those things. All right. And I keep on adding, and there are some free courses if you want. I think if I scroll down over here, there are a couple of different free courses like Swift UI fundamentals and consuming JSON API stuff. Basic free mini courses, like maybe they're like 1 hour long or so. So you can definitely check this out. All right. But apart from that, thank you so much for attending. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer it. You can write your question in your chat. If you don't have any question, hope you have a great weekend, and hopefully I will see you. I will see you in next week or maybe in the future. All right. Any questions? hopefully you have enjoyed it, and we're gonna do it again also. All right. All right. So that's pretty much it. Thank you everyone for attending. I'm gonna end the stream, and once again, thank you for attending the live stream.